Welcome to the Global News Podcast on YouTube. I'm Pete Ross. Today, I'm joined by our Middle East analyst, Sebastian Usher. Seb, the US and Iran have agreed a 2-week ceasefire. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he supports that deal, but that Israel still has war aims in the Middle East. As things stand, where does this leave Israel and its Prime Minister?
I think you've got to make a separation between two battlefronts, essentially two war zones. One is against Iran and one is against Hezbollah. And certainly Mr. Netanyahu and his government have made clear throughout that they're separate. And when one ends, the Iranian one, if it ends after the ceasefire, it doesn't mean the war in Lebanon ends. That's unfinished business as far as he's concerned. And that's what we've seen. I mean, we had the announcement by President Trump that the ceasefire was going to take place. And then not long after that, 10 hours or so after that, we had the biggest wave of strikes on Lebanon by Israel since the latest round of conflict between Israel and Hezbollah started back at the start of March. 100 strikes, roughly, in 10 minutes, all over the country, in residential areas, extraordinary destruction, more than 200 people killed, more than 1,000 wounded. So from the perspective of Mr. Netanyahu, as I say, this doesn't interfere with the Iranian side of the deal. That carries on. But from the Iranian perspective, it very much does. The Iranians and the Pakistani mediators have essentially said that Lebanon was part of a deal, that when there's a ceasefire with Iran, there should be a ceasefire with Hezbollah. Mr. Netanyahu has made clear that's not the case, and he's so far been supported by Washington and by President Trump in his comments. But we've already seen the disruption that this has caused to the ceasefire deal before the talks even started. They're due to begin this weekend. Iran, various top officials saying that this is a grave obstacle that's been created. We've heard the EU, we've heard various Western allies of the US saying that this is unacceptable. So it's, I think, in some ways, Washington's next move. How much is Washington going to try? How much is President Trump personally going to try to rein in Israel and Mr. Netanyahu in order not to essentially stop the ceasefire before it's really even started?
Do you think Netanyahu was surprised by the announcement of the ceasefire, as some have suggested?
No. I think from what we've heard that he was keen for it not to happen right now, that he spoke with the Americans to try and make the case that this was premature. They hadn't achieved the aims that had been set out by Mr. Netanyahu and by President Trump, which I think is true. I think that's undeniable. The aims that they set out haven't been achieved. The regime, although they deny that the collapse of the regime was a war aim, I mean, it clearly was at the start. The appeals they made to the Iranian people to rise up and take their moment, I mean, you can't get around that. That was a call for regime change. The destruction of the ballistic missile capacity clearly isn't the case because Iran's still able to fire those missiles at Israel, at its Gulf neighbors. And even the total destruction of Iran's ability to move towards a nuclear weapon seems in doubt as well. So those aims, as far as we know, haven't really been achieved. And of course, the Strait of Hormuz is now a new element being closed down. So from the Israeli point of view, this is not good. And it's not good for Mr. Netanyahu because he essentially promised the Israeli people, and he was still saying it. He made an address to them last night, essentially saying that we've changed the face of the Middle East. Our victories are extraordinary. This is not the Iran that was. This is not the Middle East that was. This is not the Lebanon that was. I mean, it's true that since October 7th, 2023, the Hamas-led attacks on Israel, there has been a change across the Middle East. It's true that the proxies of Iran have been severely weakened. It's true that Hezbollah is not what it was. So, there is truth to what he says, but a lot of it is also rhetoric that isn't really borne out. So I think from Mr. Netanyahu's perspective, this is both in terms of the aims that he set out and his own position politically within Israel is not a good moment.
Let's go back to the pre-war aims of both Washington and Israel. They seem to be pretty much in step at that point. Changing of the regime, nuclear material, enriched uranium. Do you think that's still the case, given that they seem to be slightly out of sync with this ceasefire?
I mean, I think the aims are still the same. The stated aims are still the same from both sides. But what President Trump wants to get out of this and what the Israeli Prime Minister wants to get out of this, they were never the same. President Trump essentially wanted clearly, I mean, we're all trying to parse what he says and it's unclear from moment to moment maybe what he really wants. But I think it's clear from everything that he's done in the past and the way this has worked itself out that he wants in and out quickly. He wants to be able to declare a victory quickly. It doesn't have to be a victory that is really what he says it is. But as long as it has the look of it, that's fine. From Mr. Netanyahu's perspective, that's not the case. He wants something that is substantive and real, even if it's perhaps unattainable. The collapse of the Iranian regime, which from everything we know, the Israelis had essentially told the Americans, this can be done. Use your power, our power. We can do this. This is going to collapse. Hasn't happened. Lebanon essentially saying, as the Prime Minister has said, as his Defense Minister Israel Katz have said, to the Israeli people who are very much in favor of the Iran offensive, but Hezbollah in Lebanon is different. There's a lot of history which goes back, and it's never been that successful an enterprise for Israel. So what they've been promising the Israelis this time we're doing it. This time there won't be a Hezbollah. This time there won't be any threat to the north of Israel. We're going to eradicate that. Mr. Netanyahu has been asked many times in the past weeks, what is the time scale? He said there isn't a time scale. There isn't a time scale. There was a warning to the people of southern Lebanon, hundreds of thousands who've had to evacuate. There's no timetable for them to return. The timetable, as far as Israel is setting out at the moment, is when Hezbollah is dealt with, then maybe you can go back. But until then, no one is going back. No residents, nobody living there.
What about inside Israel? What's his position there now? I mean, there's elections round the corner.
I mean, the original attack on Iran, as it was last year, is not unpopular in Israel. There is a general sense, all political sides, this is a price that we have to pay. They do, I think, in general, buy into what Mr. Netanyahu has been saying for years, that this is an existential threat. Lebanon, if it goes on and on, I think will become more so. One, because of a sense that we've been here before and we've never really achieved what has been said to be achieved, and we've actually, lost out because of that. And also, the Israeli army, which depends on reservists, which depends on the will of the people to want to carry on, are exhausted. But Mr. Netanyahu is indefatigable. I mean, that is an extraordinary thing. I mean, he is up, he is talking, he is maneuvering, he is working this, that, and the other to try and keep all those plates spinning in the air. He is incredibly, good at that. We know you cannot rule him out in any way. The opposition is not that strong in Israel. It doesn't really have a good, clear line of, what it's offering. And the way that Israel, the politics has always been so fractured in any case, the small parties, that need to be brought on side, you would be a fool to try and predict what's going to happen later with the elections.
Could it be that perhaps things now are not as rosy or not as good for Benjamin Netanyahu as they were before this current conflict with Iran began?
No, I think that's true. What he had to promise the Israelis was something that goes beyond what has already happened, both about Iran and about Hezbollah. About Iran, I think he's in a particularly difficult position because those aims have not been achieved. He wants to carry on with that, but he can't. If America pulls out, if President Trump pulls out, he can't carry on this alone. He won't. He may have been instrumental, as he was last year, in the conflict taking place, but in the ending, that's going to be a call by Washington and one that he's going to have to listen to. As far as the war in Lebanon is concerned, it really is, as I was saying, is down to how much President Trump wants this deal and Washington wants this deal. And I think they want it pretty badly. And if that's the case, and seeing just the reaction from Iran and from around the world to what Israel did yesterday, and to be honest, the logic of Israel doing it yesterday, has to be seen. One, you could say that that Mr. Netanyahu feels that the clock is ticking down. So his ability to take that kind of action will start to disappear. So do it now, hard. That's one thing. You could also say, as many have, and some powers in the region have also said, Arab countries, Egypt for one, but this is a naked attempt to try and disrupt the move towards a ceasefire because of the obvious reaction. Hezbollah has been firing missiles again into the north of Israel. Iran has been making these much stronger comments, as one would expect. The Strait of Hormuz, they've said it remains closed. That is almost certainly to do with the Israeli strikes on Lebanon. So, Washington, President Trump will almost certainly have a word with Mr. Netanyahu and say, look, these ceasefire deal, these negotiations, they cannot be put in jeopardy by your actions in Lebanon. So cool it for now.
Seb, thanks for joining us. Our Middle East analyst, Sebastian Usher. And if you want to know more on this story, you can click the link below. Thanks for joining us.